Thank you. So, my name is Brian Stinson. I'm here to talk a little bit about the shared upstream CI infrastructure that we've built over the past couple of years. I'm going to give a little bit of a sort of an overview of where we started and how the project has kind of evolved over a period of time to support some of the requests that we've had from our tenants and stuff like that. So like I said, my name is Brian. You can find me on Twitter and GitHub. I'm at bstinsonmhk. I'm bstinson pretty much everywhere else, so yeah, you can find me that way. I work for the CentOS project doing systems administration specifically on the CentOS CI infrastructure. So my day job is thinking about all this stuff and interfacing with new projects who might be coming on board. So just to get a little show of hands, how many of you either manage or interface with a Jenkins interface at one point or another? Okay. How many of you would like to not run Jenkins yourself? Yeah, that's quite a few of you. What?
You're not allowed to raise your hand.
Yeah, I'm not allowed to raise my hand because that's what we do. So a little bit of history about the CentOS CI project. If you're familiar with the CentOS project as a whole, what we basically do is, we produce a Linux distribution and put that out for people to consume. But we found this trouble in the project of upstream projects that wanted to build on top of the CentOS Linux base. They needed a place to actually build and test and deliver their software on the platform that we provide in CentOS Linux. And so we kind of expanded the CentOS project to include some infrastructure efforts like ci.centos.org. And that's interesting because we get projects coming on board like OpenStack and Openshift and people building RPMs through the resources that are available to them in the CentOS project. And then they also get some free infrastructure and management out of the whole thing. Because, like many of you, they don't want to run their own Jenkins instances either. So if you think about what might be needed to deliver a CI infrastructure, you can kind of think of it in terms of a few different categories. You need some place to actually stage all of the stuff that people are working on. So you need a workspace. You need some infrastructure to actually run the tests themselves. So that would be either the hardware itself, or in the Jenkins world, that would be like a slave, something like that. You need something to actually trigger the builds to start. You need a place to store all the junk that you generate during the tests, and you actually need to execute the tests. And for the most part, traditionally Jenkins tries to, if you set it up in the standard Jenkins pattern, Jenkins manages all of this for you. So, you set up your slave that has a particular operating system, a particular configuration, a particular style of installing the dependencies that you need to run your tests. And you connect that back to your Jenkins master, and that's where the workloads get run. And so a lot of these concepts actually kind of get merged together under the Jenkins umbrella. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's a good way to get started, and it's a good way to, especially if you have a lot of Jenkins experience, you can sort of combine these areas under the Jenkins umbrella and get a lot done. What we wanted to do in CentOS CI, though, was kind of not necessarily completely abstract all of this away, but make things a little bit more modular. And so that's where we started a few years ago. We started trying to kind of separate some things out where we would take care of dealing with the artifacts. We would take care of dealing with the test infrastructure and the workspaces as infrastructure components rather than something that's actually managed by Jenkins, which is really good at doing the triggering and the test execution. So that's what Jenkins is good at. We want to let it do the things that it's good at and sort of step back and provide some of the the other things as infrastructure projects. So what we started with, we knew we needed a kind of a simple way of getting people up and running in the environment and get them their test infrastructure really quickly. And so what we came up with was a tiny little wrapper API called Duffee. Now, just a little bit about the infrastructure that we're dealing with in CentOS CI. We have something around 350, I think it's somewhere around 350 bare metal nodes that are available to give out to all of the projects. So that's actually where the tests get run on those particular nodes. So we actually needed a piece of software to manage both handing that out to the individual projects, but then also deal with the cleanup, the recycling, and actually getting those machines staged. And so we wrote a simple wrapper thing called Duffee. Originally it was targeted specifically at the hardware that we have in CentOS CI. It's a product from C Micro, which they've since gone away. But we still have the hardware and we're still provisioning stuff through it. But yeah, so Duffee is the API. We wanted to make it as simple as possible, and this is how simple it is. If you're in the CentOS CI infrastructure, we have a client for the Duffee API called CICO. So you just tell it to get a node, and Duffee hands it back to you. Without any defaults, you get a CentOS 7 node on x86-64, and you can see you get a host name there that's that part is interesting once you're actually in the infrastructure and you can sort of deal with that stuff. But yeah, you can get a whole bunch of nodes at once because, again, remember, we're dealing with infrastructure projects like OpenStack, Openshift. People like that want to do really complex multi-node deployments. So unit tests are interesting. Those are definitely workloads that are useful test cases. And a lot of projects come on board to the CentOS CI project, just with their unit tests to start off with. But really complex infrastructure projects need multi-node deployments so they can deploy it exactly like their users are. So OpenStack, for example, as part of their overall CI project in OpenStack, they actually take a few of our nodes and spin up an OpenStack cluster and do some pretty rigorous integration testing. And that's pretty cool, right? Because you've got the flexibility of doing single nodes if you really want to. You've got the flexibility of doing multi-nodes if you're doing more complex things. And it's all delivered through the same API, the same stuff that you're used to dealing with once you're onboarded into the project. And so a little bit about how kind of really simple the Duffee process is. This is the entire flow diagram for dealing with a host out of Duffee. So you start up there at the top. We actually provision all of these machines minimally from Kickstart. And I'll talk a little bit about more of the hardware details that we're working on in the future. But yeah, we start with a provision from Kickstart, which is important because we want to give the projects that are in CentOS CI, we want to give them the ability to just start from scratch, minimal install of CentOS 6 and 7. And those are actually dumped into a ready pool, and that's how we kind of cheat a little bit. We keep up to 40 nodes at a time in the ready pool because we know that people are going to be requesting them quite frequently. And so we've got this ready pool, and once you do that CICO node get command, it just takes one of those out of the ready pool, checks it out to you, and the machine is yours. It's provisioned with your SSH key. You've got root access on the machine, so you can install all of your dependencies either from packages up to, if you need stuff from PyPy or Ruby gems or something like that. The thing is, you own that whole process yourself. So you've got to bring along your dependencies with you every time that you do the test, because again, this is a minimal install here. Once you've got the machine, you do all your tests. And then we kind of do this little loop down here that not a lot of people use because it's really only useful in a few cases, but we let you keep the machine for a little bit longer. If one of your tests fails, you can call out to the Duffy API and say, hey, hang on a minute, my test failed, and I kind of want to get in on that machine manually myself to see what went wrong. And so there's a little loop there that kind of holds those machines in reserve for you so that you can clean them up later. And then once you return a machine, it goes into the active pool, and we start the process all over again. We'll take it, provision it from Kickstart, hand it out to somebody else. We've got a little bit of experience doing this. These are our top 10 projects. So you can see RDO has done about 84,500 deploys over the life of the project. And these are some of the other groups that are involved. Well, I guess RDO has more because they have 2 keys. Trying to remember why that is. But yeah, basically we do a lot of deploys. I think, if I remember right, yeah, here we go. So far since, over the life of the project, we've installed and reinstalled those machines around 372,008 times as of this morning. Yeah.
Sorry, the 72,000 overall?
So this will be the life of the project, which we started around in 2015 or so. Yeah, yeah. So at the end of your test run, generally people have a whole bunch of stuff that gets generated during the process. So this could be images, this could be packages that are built, test logs themselves. We solved the artifacts problem by basically handing you rsync. We've got a machine that is dedicated to serving all of this stuff out over HTTP, and you basically get a folder on that server that you sync your logs to. Now that's problematic, and we'll kind of talk about some plans for that in the future. But for now, let's kind of dive into a little bit of the Jenkins stuff, because Jenkins is still a major part of the CentOS CI infrastructure. And this is the front page. One of our main things that we wanted to do was provide a single page that people could hit and look at all the projects that you care about. So I mentioned OpenStack, for example. We also have upstream libvirt and QEMU and projects like that. They can actually go up, take a look at ci.centos.org, and see if they're going to break in, a month, 2 months time, something like that. It's really important to have all of these projects on one single page so that they can kind of get an idea of what's coming their way. And that's what's really nice about dealing with this in an upstream fashion. Each of these upstream projects are, kind of interconnected, and it's nice to have a place that we can do all this integration work. But there are other things out there too. So about this time last year, we got the Fedora Atomic CI folks. They've been talking about their project all day. They came to us and wanted to see how we could do some more interesting things in the space of CI. And that's all delivered through Openshift. So it's actually been really good for us as a project too, because Openshift is, as we sort of transition over into that style of administration, it makes my life a little bit easier as an administrator. And it also is going to kind of make things a little bit easier in terms of moving forward with onboarding projects who may not have the same test patterns as others. So we want to make the onboarding process easy, so you can lift over your existing processes and then move them over into a CentOS CI style pipeline-driven technology a little bit more easily. I'm going to skip over MultiArch just because it's a thing. We're going to do it over the next year or so, but we do have things beyond x86-64 in the environment. A little bit about the future. Most things is business as usual. So we have those 300,000 builds and deploys. We think we know how to do that pretty good. We want to keep doing that and not break things for people in that workflow. But we want to look at migrating some of our Jenkins workloads over into Openshift. Like I said, it makes things a little bit easier to manage. There are some problems that we have to deal with about, I mentioned, keeping all of that stuff on a single page and everything like that, making sure that the results are discoverable. We've got some things to work out around that, but Openshift is going to make administration a whole lot more easier for me. Support the CI pipeline. Those guys are very important to us as a partner project. Expand Duffee version 2. So the past week or so, we actually released the source code for our node provisioner Duffee. We've got a lot of interesting features and things that people have requested in the past, and it's important to us to make sure that that's open source and folks out there in the community can contribute to that as we go on, because that's sharing the maintainership for that is something that we really like to do. So yeah, it's up on GitHub, github.org/CentOS/Duffee. If you are a tenant of CentOS CI right now, feel free to talk to me about contributing to that if that's something that you're interested in. Supporting the Fedora community. This is another big goal that we have over the next, next year specifically, but also over the life of the two projects, because we think that the collaboration in the upstream is one way that we can do some really interesting things in terms of shared infrastructure and stuff like that. So we've started some of the migrations over from Fedora has a Jenkins instance of their own. We've started a little bit of work to sort of help them migrate. They're actually a tenant in our Openshift environment right now. Like I said, this is the sort of lift them over and see if we can work on some of the dynamic provisioning steps for each of these individual jobs in parallel to that. We've got some infrastructure work to do. So this would be related to some of the storage requirements that people are coming at us with, and just making sure that we use a lot of the new hardware that we've been dedicated to this effort. So we've got a lot of resources to put behind our Openshift environment, and then also expand out into the storage layers and things like that, as well as the MultiArch side of the house. So we both purchase hardware and have really friendly vendors to the project who are interested in contributing their lab hardware to us, basically, for use in public upstream CI. And that gets us a few things. It gets us the validation that CentOS works on AR64, PowerPC, things like that. But it also gets those vendors some information about how things are going. And the last thing is to get you involved. So those of you who would like to not run your own Jenkins instance, come talk to me. I'm sure we can figure out a place for you. And if you're interested in contributing to the various projects in CentOS CI, like Duffee, or even some of the administration work, we'd love to hear from you. Here's some links. The top one is our mailing list. There's a wiki page if you're interested in getting started in CentOS CI. And there's Duffee, and you can talk to us on Freenode in IRC. So I just got the flag that I'm out of time, so we've got some time for questions. Yeah?
Maybe with something with, is that project related somehow to Node perspective, or is it the same idea?
Yeah, so the question was, is Duffee related in any way to Node Pool coming out of OpenStack? It's similar idea. We kind of got started just because it was specifically tailored to the C micro hardware, and it was a really, really minimal thing when we started it off in 2015. And so we're kind of maintaining the API compatibility, which is why Duffee is still a thing.
Can
Yeah, so I skipped over this a little bit. One of our main infrastructure efforts coming over the next year is we've got an OpenStack cloud that is going to be deployed and plumbed into Duffee in the next, over the next couple of months or so. We're still working out the features for that. We would definitely, Fedora is definitely a priority for that. Other distributions, maybe. But yeah, we will have Fedora resources available in CentOS CI for some of that.
So it will be the same style as if you're asking for CentOS.
Yeah, it'll be so. Yeah, so we have the fields in place in Duffee to actually ask for an operating system. Right now, we just only have CentOS filled out in there. So. Yeah.
So regarding Jenkins, you said that you want to have one dashboard for all the projects related to just one Jenkins. But can Jenkins actually survive?
Yeah.
Because to be honest, Jenkins dashboard is ugly and hard to understand anything. And I also think when there are hundreds of projects, even just rendering this dashboard for Jenkins is hard. And if it's in the same time it does triggering, then this rendering the dashboard will affect the triggering.
Yeah. So the comment is Jenkins is bad and we should feel bad. But you're right. It is very resource intensive to do hundreds and hundreds of projects in the same master. And I think going forward, especially splitting some of that up and doing the management in Openshift and doing a single master per project is probably going to be the style that we go to. The problem that we have to solve then is making sure that all those masters get the results back to a single point, because that's what we care about in CentOS is doing the big family of projects that are running their tests in CentOS. We want to be sure that they don't lose any discoverability that way. To be honest, we haven't. So far, we've got. I think we might be up to 150 projects by now, so we've got a little bit of room to kind of throw resources at it until we can't. But yeah, it's definitely a concern that's in the back of our minds as we figure out what we're doing in the long term. So. All done? All right, thank you.